Good evening. I'm Moon Harrison with Arlington Independent Media, and we're here at Yorktown High School in Arlington, Virginia, with some cast members from their production of The Girls Who Glow.
And I'm Stephen Giballa, and I am here with four of the cast members from The Girls Who Glow. We're joined by Reese Gidner, Mary Gay, Lyndon Huffman, and Clifton Kubiak. I think I would like to begin. I think it would make sense for each of you all, maybe we'll just pass the microphone, and for you all to first introduce yourselves by describing the characters that you were portraying and sort of their role within the production itself.
I'm Reese Gidner, and I played the character Kay Wiley, and she was the advocate for the Radium Girls. She played a key role in getting their case into court, and she pulled all of her strings that she possibly could to get the media to notice them. So she pulled a lot of favors, and she was one of the big reasons that these Radium Girls were actually noticed. Otherwise, they would have just faded away.
I'm Mary, and I played Albina, who was one of the 5 Radium Girls, who, including along with one of her sisters named Quinta, and I helped get it. I was one who wanted to sue, and we took it to court, and yeah.
I'm Lyndon. I played Harrison Martland. Harrison was a very important person in the discovery of whether or not radium was dangerous. Without his research, they wouldn't have known that radium caused necrosis of the bone. And he's the one who diagnosed the girls with a year to live.
I'm Clifton Kubiak, and I played Dr. Von Sachaki, and he was the creator of Undark, which is the substance which the girls used to paint the watch dials and ultimately caused them radium poisoning. He also had radium poisoning, so he was dying, and he invented it as a way to cure his sister's cancer, which ended up killing her. So he told Arthur Roeder, which was the head of U.S. Radium, and they paid him off to keep his findings a secret.
Wow, that's very interesting. A lot of internal conflicts going on with the characters in this play. I was wondering, my understanding is that this originated as a screenplay, and then there was an earlier performance back in October, and then there's this recent performance, and you're gearing up for a one-act play competition. Is that right? Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about the transition from those forms before?
So we did this play earlier in the year in about October, and it was originally an about 80-page screenplay written by a Yorktown alumni, Ginny Mohler. And so we had to not only cut down the time from the screenplay, but we had to make it fit the stage because the stage is very different from film, obviously. So we cut that down to about 45 minutes in the fall, and we presented the play then. And then we revamped the play in the past 3 or so weeks, and we had a lot of changes. We had new cast, people switched characters, I switched characters, and we did that in order to get the play cut down to under 35 minutes for the competition, which we have tomorrow, which is the Virginia High School League competition, VHSL, where high schools from all over Virginia compete in theater competitions and are judged and can go to the next levels.
This play obviously deals with heavy themes. I think it's fair to say that the majority of the characters depicted on stage die, right? Is that okay? So, there's a lot of depth to convey, and you don't have a lot of time to convey it. So, I'm curious just about, for each of you, your process, from the first moment that the play begins of how you're going about getting into character, getting into such a kind of serious, dark place, and what those few minutes are like before the lights come up for each of you, kind of what's just going through your mind.
Well, for me, I like to try and take a step back and look at my character from a distance, which is something that we do in our theater class. And when we learn characterization, you take a step back and look at your character. And I think about what her goals are and why she is the way she is. And I think about what her relationships are with each of the people that she interacts with. So I know before I even go on stage, I know this is what this person's life is like, and now this is what my life is like stepping into that person.
Well, it's really hard to go into the mindset of someone who's dying. And so I usually just hook into the characterization of my character, and that helps me look like I'm in pain and live that pain. A fun fact about Albina, my character, is that there's so much decay in her right leg that it was 4 inches shorter than her left leg. So my limp is I keep my right leg fully extended, so I just bend my left leg so it looks like it's shorter. And I also think about the fact that I have a sister on the stage, and I'm an older sister. I have a younger brother, so I'm generally act kind of like the mother of my friend group, so that's kind of easy taking care of the other Radium girls, and so I just kind of made that decision for my character.
Well, Dr. Martland is the one who diagnoses the girls, and I at first wanted to take this very solemn view, but then I watched a lot of Bones and saw one of the characters is very, they're all very interested in what they're studying and very intrigued by even the grossest and most morbid of things. And so I tried to take a very positive outlook and try to just get really, really into the science of why these girls are sick. And necrosis is actually very cool. And so I just got really excited about science backstage and was going through my mind, this is really cool, this is really cool. You are saving these girls, this is really cool. And that's basically what I was thinking.
Sounds like you were well cast if you personally think that necrosis is very cool. So I'm glad that worked out for you.
What helped me was Noah Schultz, the person who played Arthur Roeder, and I, in October, we did an improv session where this was when we were just getting to know our characters, and we just improv'd, and it got really heated, and I found what our relationship was, and I found why I was doing what I was doing, and it just helped me get into it. So before the show, I like to take a minute and close my eyes and tell myself, as my character, what my situation is, and then that helps me think as my character and experience everything as if I were experiencing it for the first time.
So what do you mean? I find it interesting you described that improv when things got really heated between you and Noah. What was that moment like?
So we picked the moment when he's paying me off to keep my findings a secret. So I knew what the circumstances were, but I wasn't sure why I was doing what I was doing. So I went in to his office and I presented my findings, and then I got to learn his motivations and my motivations through just off the top of our head because we had an idea of what they were.
Okay, cool.
Wow, that's really interesting. Improvisation, being in the moment. Can you, any of you, talk about any exercises or processes you use to stay in the moment as your character?
So before every show, we meet in the black box, and we go through this process called viewpoints, where we're walking around. Miss Cadby, our director and teacher, will clap her hands and we'll all freeze. And then the idea of viewpoints is that as a collective, as an ensemble, we decide when to go. No one leaves. It's just kind of this feeling in the room that it's really hard to explain unless you do it. And then we all go at the same time. And then it progresses where we feed off each other. We stop if our stop and starts are motivated by others' movements. And then we keep going to the point where we add our characterizations. We go into our characters. We interact with the other people in the space as our characters. So right before the show today, we got to this point where all the Radium girls and the sisters and Tess, the sister Tess and Ellie, the people, we were all clumped together behind Wiley, who's Reese, and whenever Death, who is played by Amy, she came walking towards us, we would just scatter and then reconvene in another part of the stage, of the black box. And then, or when Arthur Roeder came, or even Von Sachaki, because he's kind of a creepy person towards the Radium girls, he hits on one of them. So we would avoid them and kind of band together. And that helped me a lot. I really got into my character then. There's also this moment when we eat in character, and so we can interact and kind of go off on our own for that. And so just all those things help us get into character. And I even found myself today a feeling that I'd never had before during the courtroom scene. I could tell I was in character because the audience kept laughing when the scientists were talking and saying these terrible things to us, and I was getting mad at the audience. They were like, you are not supposed to be laughing at this. This is not funny. So I knew I was in character when that happened, so that was pretty fun.
Wow, I'm wondering, you ate in character. That was interesting. They talked about that during the talkback. I'm wondering, did any of you discover some of your subtext during the process, during some of those off-stage times? Any of you?
Well, when we were eating in character, I didn't know who I was supposed to talk to, so I ended up latching onto Clifton and explaining how cool it was that there were chemicals in the pizza we were eating. And just telling like anyone who would come by that there are chemicals in the pizza, there are chemicals we're ingesting, there are chemicals in the air. And everyone was looking at me like, you're really crazy. And I discovered that my character, it doesn't matter how anyone views him. He believes what he believes, and he's going to try and do no matter what to prove that he is right and that this is real. And it was really funny getting to torture Clifton because Clifton's character is dying of radium poisoning, and I was telling him how deadly radium poisoning was. Do you have something to say about that, Clifton?
I do. So talking to Lyndon, I discovered my relationship with the other doctors who are advocating for the girls, because my character originally, he works with Raymond Barry, who's the lawyer representing the girls, and so he's supposed to also advocate for these women, but then Arthur Roeder pays him off again to go against them in court, which just throws them all off. So I kind of learned how uncomfortable that was. It's like, I know something you don't know.
So I want to make sure that we have an opportunity, because we learned a little bit in the question and answer session about this collaborative workshopping process that Yorktown does, which sounds really like a fantastic experience. So I want to give you all the opportunity to describe for the audience a little bit what that workshopping process is like, how it works, and sort of what makes the Yorktown program special.
So at the beginning of every single Yorktown production, we get the script and we read through it as a cast. We go around in a circle and we read for the characters switching for the scenes. And then once we've read the script and thrown out every idea for how we can portray things that you can possibly imagine, we'll be split into groups. And we'll go through a process that we call workshopping, like was talked about in the question and answer. And so each group will get a scene starting at the beginning of the play, and we'll work our way to the end. So if you have 5 groups, you get the first 5 scenes. And they will come up with an idea and put it on its feet and have people play different parts in the scene and So we just get a ton of ideas for scenes. And so we do that for the entire show. And then once we've finished, Miss Cadby, our director and teacher, as Mary said, will take everything and she'll help us form it into a cohesive play, especially for a play like this where we really can do anything that we want with it because it's an original work. So workshopping is really important. Otherwise, we would have nowhere to go. And so I think that's something that's really special about Yorktown Theater is it's very, very collaborative. There's not a lot of places where everyone in the cast, in the ensemble, gets a say and gets to put out their ideas for what the play could be like, and then have those ideas taken into account and actually listened to.
That's great. So I'm actually curious, sort of building on that process of collaboration, how much freedom do you all have during the rehearsal process to try new things?
After a certain point, it's up to Miss Cadby because she's the director, and after a certain point, we don't want to change a bunch of stuff, but we usually end up doing that. But during rehearsals, if we have ideas for a scene, like very recently, yesterday, she was like, "Okay, we need to cut 5 more minutes off the show. Where do you guys think we can cut it?" And so we would share those ideas with her during rehearsal. But also during this whole process, there was a certain point where we were having issues as a cast letting go of our director's hats that we're supposed to have at the beginning of the idea making, because we couldn't let that go. So there's a lot of friction between the cast members and between us and Miss Cadby. So and a lot of us weren't very happy with how the show was going at that point. But then we just hit this day, and I think everyone was just like, Miss Cadby knows what she's doing. We trust Miss Cadby, and we let it go. And after that, we were so much happier with the show, and we were so much happier with how everything was going. And we just accepted it because I personally had a lot of issues with the catwalk or the pageant. That's what it's called, the pageant, and I could not understand why that was a good thing to have in the show, but now that's my favorite scene in the show. So it's a really cool process that we do get to share our ideas, but we also do get to understand how it's a director's vision and how that all comes together in one thing.
Okay, so let's take a look at the clip. This is the pageant sequence.
Radium, you aren't alone. And I wasn't alone. 5 of us decided to fight back against the company, and we became known as the Radium Girls. There's Albina, her sister Quinta. Then there's Edna and Grace. I ate the paint for 4 long years, and then the pain started to spread from my knees to my hips to my gums.
I started when I was 16, stayed until I got married. Then the pain starts in my ankle, then my hip, then my shoulder, and then my elbow, and now I can't raise my arm.
I worked there for only 2 years. Then my teeth start falling out. My hips hurt. I'm in a cast from my knees to my chest. My kids don't know what's wrong with me, and neither do I. After Irene died, the pain in my feet and teeth began. I have 15 surgeries to remove rotten teeth and bone. I'm in a back brace and a foot brace. But the pain...
I'm not dead yet. I'm gonna fight.
Well, I remember back when we were workshopping it. So we said this in the Q&A, but originally the pageant scene was a Fosse number, and there were songs, and there were about 10 Radium Girls. And they had these long monologues of everything that went wrong with them, and it was very similar to Cell Block Tango in Chicago.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was in the group that workshopped it, and there was like 6 of us, and we just went down a row, and we decided to make this a pageant. And it was really weird at the beginning. We didn't really know what we were doing. Like Mary said, we weren't really willing to let it go. And seeing it from workshopping where it was boys playing the Radium Girls and to this amazing thing that is also one of my favorite scenes in the show. It's pretty incredible, and we wouldn't have been able to do it without that original idea in the workshopping. It never would have happened.
I'm curious as just what your thoughts are on the difference between the mediums of theater and film, especially from a writing and directing perspective, or as an actor, whatever. What are your guys' feelings about what the differences are between theater and film?
Well, I like writing for stage more because I can picture it better. And like one of my scripts is specifically for black box theater, and because that's where I've experienced it. I prefer a minimal set, minimal props, and less very specific detail and more interpretive. And so I prefer scripts, and because I think in movies you can go into way more detail, a lot longer, and here you go.
So what I've learned about writing versus acting is writing, I never thought that I liked writing, but when Aaron Geyer, the person that I was writing this film with, and I started writing for the characters, I realized that I thought I knew the characters, but as I kept writing, I grew with them, and I learned what they would do, which is really cool to me because it's an experience that's so hard to explain. And then when you're acting, you don't get that experience, but you get to immerse yourself in the character's world and understand their situation, and then you expand your empathy is what we've been learning in theater, and that's also helping with writing for the one-person shows that we're performing in April.
Interesting. You mentioned expanding your empathy. That's a theme I'd like to go into and perhaps close on. There are a lot of interesting themes of pain and the public and people in power maybe not being the best actors, in this play. And I can see a lot of parallels in our current world. You guys are millennials. You're looking forward. You're going to be taking us forward. What are your thoughts just on the world at large as it relates to the themes that this play has explored? Anyone?
Well, I am planning on majoring in political science, so I really care about the government, and I think that a lot of the corruption you saw in Girls Who Glow is still a problem in modern day government, and I hope that it's not as dramatic as it is in Girls Who Glow. Even though that wasn't the government, it was big business. I think that the big guy beating up the small guy is still a really big problem in the US. And I think this show really emphasizes that and makes people think. Did that make sense?
Wow. Yes. Thank you. Yes.
So with the themes of the show in mind, I think I really identify with the character that I played, Wiley, because she's very very enthusiastic and passionate about what she believes in, and that's very much me. Whenever I find a cause that I believe in, I'm very attached to it, and I think that there are definitely still problems with business in our society. Like we've seen recent examples with Volkswagen and that whole debacle. But I think that even more than just business versus smaller people, just overall the equality and just normal treatment of people as human beings needs to be examined, because it's not, this play took place in the 1920s, And these girls were not treated very well. And there are still people in the world today who are treated very, very badly. And I think that it really needs to change, and that maybe through theater we can get that point across more.
Yes, through theater. Wow. Clifton, Mary, would you like to add anything to that point?
I was never very into the whole politics thing until this year, mostly because it was just so complicated and confusing and upsetting sometimes. Like, this stuff happens, and just everything felt so, like, everything feels so overwhelming. Even now, I'm in AP government this year, which has really helped me learn and actually just lay out American politics, and then now we're in comparative government. So that's helped as I've become more aware, especially since this is a big election year and I'll be able to vote in this election. I feel like I need to be more aware of what's going on in our country, because I really wasn't before. So, and just doing this at the same time as learning all about the government and the bureaucracy and how hard it is to get something done and how hard it is to make change, but how it is possible is just a interesting thing to know, because these girls really did make a difference. They died before they could see that, but this was the first case they set the precedent for employees to be able to sue the corporations that employ them, and that set precedents for today that are, I think, helping with situations. But as we said about Volkswagen and stuff, this stuff's still happening. People are still lying to make money, and people need to become aware of that, and we're getting there, I think.
Would you like to?
Something that I've discovered is that I think we're very fortunate to have this opportunity to show people that we're not so different from one another, even though you may like look at everyone and think, wow, we're so different. You can always find similarities, and I think that is something that acting through stage or film or writing, it's a really cool experience to be able to put that message out and have people observe it in like an entertaining way, and then either take away a subliminal message or maybe they get it right off the bat. But either way, it might stick with them, and I think that's a very cool concept.
All right. Well, thank you, guys. I think that's all the time that we have this evening. But thank you for joining us, and thank you for watching in Arlington Independent Media with these 4 talented young actors. So good job, everyone.
Thank you, and good night.
At my funeral, might there be a lot of roses there?
We took the money. And U.S. Radium kept operating in New York, selling paint to Connecticut. Other radium companies kept it up elsewhere, saying that their radium was different from the kind that killed us. And the federal judge who negotiated the settlement out of the goodness of his heart turned out to be a shareholder in U.S. Radium. To be honest, I wasn't surprised. I don't expect people in power to do the right things for the right reasons anymore. And I don't expect public institutions to protect citizens who don't have power or money, even if that's what they're there for.